Let's pretend we're in front of that room full of $20 million prospects. I want you to have the exact words, know exactly what to say, what to do, how to respond. So we learn how to close them in the first meeting. That's what I'm known for in the industry. Closing a prospect of any size the first time you meet with them.
Welcome to The Edge for Tomorrow, the podcast where founders and leaders in fintech and financial services reveal their strategies for success, growth, and staying ahead. Let's jump into today's episode. We're joined by someone who transformed grit into growth and burnout into breakthrough. Erin Botsford is a financial advisor turned visionary business strategist who built a self-managing firm from the ground up. And now she's trained thousands of advisors to think like owners, not operators. A former Barron's Top 100 advisor, Erin is on a mission to help financial professionals trade hustle for high performance. Erin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I love that intro. Can I borrow that?
Absolutely. We'll send it over to you. We have beautiful writers, but more so than that is you have an amazing story, background, and success. I'm just thrilled to dive into everything.
Glad to be here. I owned a financial services company for 31 years. I sold it in 2017, and I decided to give back to the industry that allowed me to become really successful. And I started another training program called the Elite Advisor Success System. It was born out of the fact that I struggled really badly in the financial services business. I walked in to a stock brokerage firm looking for a job as a secretary, and the man said, "I'm going to make you a stockbroker." And I was like, I didn't know the difference between a stock and a bond. I'd never heard of a mutual fund, but I was young and naive enough that I said, okay. So I went to all my 3 weeks of training and came back. And it was like, if you can picture, those salmon that are swimming upstream, just trying to make it in the business for the first 10 years. It was just, very difficult. And I swear to God, that I was in a stock brokerage firm and there was mostly men. I think there was one or two other women in my firm. I knew they were taking bets on how long I was going to last in the business. I mean, I knew that. So I finally decided to quit. I went to my branch manager. I hadn't taken a day off in 7 years. I was like, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. And so, he said, "Oh, Erin, you're not a quitter." He said, "Go get some business coaching." So I did. And something happened in the third session. The 12th session. It was the third year. And we were all asked to stand up and share our progress, over that 3-year period. And so I stood up and I saw this random guy standing alone. I said, "Do you want to do the exercise together?" He goes, "Yeah, let's do it." Now, it turns out, Tracy, that not everybody in my class were financial advisors. We had doctors and lawyers and plumbers and, but it just so happened this guy happened to be in our business. And so I was really excited about my progress. So I wanted to go first. And so I said, "I'm Erin Botsford. I'm from Dallas, Texas." And I said, 3 years ago, I was doing around $300,000 in production. And I said, this year I'm on target to do somewhere between 400 and 450. And I was thinking to myself, like, look at me. I was really happy with my progress. And then it was his turn. His name was Colin. And he said 3 years ago, he'd also been doing around 300,000 in production. And I thought to myself, well, look at that. We are just alike. We were about the same age and everything. And then he said, the words I'll never forget. He said, this year I'm on target to do 3 million in production. And I don't meet with any of my existing clients anymore. I've built an entire team around me. So all I do is go out and I sell the philosophy of my firm. And then I, tell clients they have to be willing to work with and meet with various members of my team. And of course, his voice started trailing off in my head. I'm like, what did you say? Did you just say you went from 300,000 to 3 million in 3 years? And he goes, yeah. And you don't meet with all your clients for the reviews? He goes, no, I built a team around me to do that. And of course, the bell rings. It was time to go back to our seats. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And I tell people it was like that ALS, that bucket challenge moment. And I just couldn't, I was stammering and stuttering and I was just in disbelief. And so I said, could I buy a few hours of your time? And fortunately for me, he said, yeah. He goes, in fact, why don't you come spend the day with me and my team? So literally, as quickly as I could get back to Texas, I actually made my husband, who was an airline pilot, come with me because I wanted him to understand. I just knew there was going to be a big cost to getting those kind of results. Like maybe we're going to have to get a divorce, and I wanted him to understand why, or sell our firstborn child. And I didn't know but I knew there was going to be a big cost to getting those results. So I spent one day with Paul. I caught the vision of what he was all about, what he was doing. And I have to say, Tracy, it was kind of like people talk about that Roger Bannister moment. Roger Bannister was some guy that nobody had ever run the mile in under 4 minutes. And Roger Bannister apparently was the first person to ever do that. And then after that, once people saw that it could be done, many, many, many runners after that ran it. And so that's how it was for me. Once I saw that what could be, I literally came back. I had one part-time assistant that I shared with four other guys. I went to the branch manager and said, can I pay for her full time? She was 20, right out of college. She'd graduate in 3 years. And I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to go out and bring in business and you're going to do everything else. And fortunately for me, she was like, okay, so, a couple of years later, I did 3 million, then 4 million, then 5 million. My business just kept growing. I had an office in Dallas, one in Atlanta. I consistently had 7 conference rooms between the 2 offices filled with clients of my firm, and I wasn't in any one of them. So I set up a very attractive business for an acquisition in 2017, and I trained thousands of advisors to say, here's what to do, here's what not to do. And, I believe in this concept that money loves speed. So I can train them in everything they need to know in 6 months or less. And the really cool thing is when you know what to do, it's like baking a cake. You just follow the formula, it works. Don't deviate from the formula. And they're getting, it's really cool. They're getting the same results I got. It took me 2 decades and they're getting it in 6 months. So super cool. And I'm having a great time. I feel like a force multiplier, So that's my story.
Absolutely. Um, so let's dive into your business. You talk about building a self-managing business. What's the first bottleneck most advisors don't even realize they've built around themselves?
Yeah. So most advisors come in as solo practitioners and they don't have the confidence. They have a confidence to work at a level, let's say, of net worth that their parents, where they were raised, right? So if they were raised in a middle class family, they don't either have the skill or the confidence to work with very high net worth individuals. Neither did I. When I met with Paul, I would take any client, before that, I would take any client that could fog a mirror. So when you will take a client that gives you 50,000 or 500,000, you get a lot of them. And you end up like a hamster on a hamster wheel, just running as fast as you can. And it's exhausting, right? So what I teach is and a lot of advisors, they say they want to move up market. They understand the rationale because wealthier people have more margin in their lives. They care about other people. So you can ask them, you can do a lot of business with one wealthy client. A $10 million client has a mom or dad, and they want to make sure that they have long-term care insurance on their mom and dad. Wealthy people understand leverage. I'd rather pay the long-term care insurance policy than have to pay mom and dad's $14,000 a month nursing home care. So they got the means, they care, they've got bandwidth, they have margin. But the problem, their first bottleneck is the typical advisor, they get a lot of product training, but they don't get the appropriate training to approach and close these 5, 10, 20, $30 million clients. So they tell a story to themselves that there just aren't any of those in my area. Well, that's almost laughable because there are high net worth people in every area. So case in point, after meeting with Paul and finding out he was working with 10, 20, $100 million clients, I was like, oh my gosh, like he doesn't look any smarter than me. We're the same age. Like, how does he do that? Well, he had an air about him. He had a confidence. So what I did, Tracy, is I came back to Dallas and I hired an attorney to come to my office every Monday for a year. And I paid her and I said, I want to understand the issues of high net worth people. How do they make decisions? What do they think about? What are they focused on? How do they select an advisor? So she met with me. And the funny thing, Tracy, is I invited every other advisor in my branch to come for free, have these lessons. Guess how many showed up?
I hate to say zero.
0. Now, my assistant was in all the meetings, but what happened was because I knew when I left that day with Paul at his office after following around for a day, I knew skills, to attract that kind of a client, skills were going to be a problem, but more importantly, confidence. So that's why I invested in myself. Think about spending $1,000 an hour for 52 weeks, $52,000. And I invested because I wanted to be prepared in the case I ran into one of these people. Now, I didn't do the opposite. A lot of advisors, they want to pray that they run into these people and then they don't have the skill or the confidence to do anything with them. In fact, a lot of them, they'll say, hey, Erin, can you help me find those $20 million prospects? I'm like, of course I can. Like, that's where I played. But then I'll say, what if I put you in a room? If there's 50 people in the room and they're all worth minimum $20 million. Would you have any idea what to say? Do you even get a meeting with them? Or then when you get the meeting to close them? And typically, most advisors say, I'm not sure. So that's why I think, Tracy, in my program, on purpose, we start off, let's pretend we're in front of that room full of $20 million prospects. I want you to have the exact words, know exactly what to say, what to do, how to respond. So we learn how to close them in the first meeting. That's what I'm known for in the industry. Closing a prospect of any size the first time you meet with them. So I'm really good at that. And now I've trained thousands of advisors and they get to do it too.
Having worked with thousands of advisors, are there any traits that you see that separates the top 1% from the rest?
I think the biggest thing, it comes down to, a lot of psychology. Because the one thing that Paul did for me on that day that I left his office is, and now I'll put it in a nutshell. I believe that in order to be in that 1%, you have to have a big enough why. Why would you want to change anything about your life or your business? So Paul gave me an exercise, and I give it to all my advisor students. I'll say, he said, on the way up, Erin, if you had millions and millions, he said the number $10 million, if you had it sitting in the bank, what would you do with that money? Now, $10 million at that point, I don't think I had $50 in the bank. I'm not sure, but 10 million was just a big number. So the point is, if money was not an issue, what would I do? Because here's the problem in our industry. In our industry, it is not hard for any advisor to get to a place of personal comfort, right? They can own a home, have 2 cars, put their kids through college. That's not hard. You can get to that level pretty easily. But again, if you want to get to the next level or in that top 1%, it requires a different skill set. It requires confidence. It has some requirements. It takes practice. Think about an NFL player or a Michael Jordan. How many baskets did Michael Jordan throw before he became the Michael Jordan that we know, right? Mm-hmm. It's no different in our industry. So what I teach are very learnable skills. It's like, we got to do 1,000 baskets. Okay. We got to do 1,000 baskets. Most advisors aren't willing to do that. They'll do 100, but they're not going to do 1,000. So to get to the top 1%, you have to practice over and over and over again. I can give you the exact words to say, and that's what I do. I say, this is the formula, don't mess it up. But they might listen to the recording once or twice. The real superstars that have come out of my program, they listen to it every week for a year. Right? And they get it. And it's like, because then it's just memorization, right? And so I think, so when I came back from my one day with Paul, I thought, if money was not an issue, then one day, because my husband's from my husband's from a big family. I'm one of 6, he's one of 5. And we love our families, but they're all, let's call it middle class, families. And I thought, if money wasn't an issue, I would like to take all of our family members on this crazy good trip every 5 years. And if money wasn't an issue, I would like to make sure I put all of my nieces and nephews through college. And if money wasn't an issue, I really have a heart for veterans and orphans, and I'd like to really be able to pour into that. Well, it turned out what's interesting is that all of those things came true. The last time, so every 5 years, we've taken our entire families on a trip. Usually it's a cruise because that's easier. Last time we took 77 people on a cruise, all expenses paid for. Up until my training program, I supported 500 children at an orphanage in Zambia. Because of the success of my training program, I now support 5,500 children in Zambia. And it's all because of money, right? And so I feel like in order to do what it takes to take your business to the next level, you have to have a big enough why. And I believe that if the only reason you're doing this is for your own personal comfort, that's never going to be a big enough why to do the work that's necessary to throw those baskets to learn what you need to learn.
What are some of the things that an advisor, a professional can say to a high net worth client, to those multi-million-dollar clients that kind of flag that, oh, this is not for me? Like, there must be some common things that you hear.
The one thing not to say is when somebody says, "What do you do for a living?" Your response should never be, "I'm a financial advisor." That is the kiss of death. So you want to say, "I own a financial services firm. I'm senior level, I'm the CEO of a financial services company." But the problem in our industry, Tracy, and I think a lot of people that listen to your podcast are in our industry, is here's the deal. Consumers are not stupid, okay? They are very enlightened, especially now with the internet. And here's they have a hierarchy. In the hierarchy, they put their attorneys up here, their CPAs here. So if this is a video, the attorneys way at the top, next in line are the CPAs. And then I joke and say, then there's their Mercedes dealer. And then way at the bottom is us.
Right.
And why is that? And we've done it to ourselves, for one, over the millennia. But the attorneys, of course, they went to college, went to law school, passed the bar exam. CPAs, college, they passed the CPA exam. Mercedes, don't know what they did. Everybody knows, every consumer knows, there's a very low threshold passing the Series 7 to become a financial services person, right?
Mhm.
What I teach advisors is I teach them the language where they can interact with those very high net worth prospects. In fact, what's interesting, I teach them, if you're going to work up there in the 10, 20, 30, $50 million world, which is very easy to do, the other thing you must be willing to do is to charge for your advice. So I'll give you an example. I had an advisor named Justin who went through my program. He'd only been in the program 5 weeks. And Justin had been in business for 15 years, and he'd never charged a financial planning fee. And so he came through the program. He knows I'm adamant that if you want to work at that high level, you've got to be willing to charge for your advice, and I'll tell you why. So he said, "Erin, I got this opportunity to get in front of a $40 million business owner." And he said, "Until I took your course and had the resource, I would have never even taken the appointment. I had no to say." He said, "So I stayed on all weekend. I binge watched your secret sauce." And he goes, "I wanted to be as prepared as I could." So he goes to the meeting on Monday and he does exactly what I tell him to do. We use disturbing tracks. And at the end, the meeting, the guy goes, "Okay, Justin, what's it going to take to fix these problems?" What he was really asking is, "Justin, what is your financial planning fee going to be?" And Justin said, "Erin, I was sitting there. I could hear your voice in my head. And the voice was saying, 'Justin, at a moment like this, you have to say the biggest number that can come out of your mouth.'" He said, "So I took a chance and I said, 'My annual financial planning fee is $44,500. And the guy said, 'Done.'" If he would have said, "Oh yeah, I've identified all these issues in your life and I work for free," the guy would have laughed him out the door. In fact, if he'd have said, "My financial planning fee is $7,500, the guy would have said, go bye-bye, little boy," because high net worth people, the people that you want to work with, they're used to paying their attorneys hundreds of thousands of dollars. When somebody needs a heart surgeon, they're looking for the best heart surgeon. They associate the best with price. When they need to defend themselves using an attorney, they always associate the best with the most expensive. Rolex gets a lot more, money for it's the best, right? And
Right.
so that's why I can't understand that memo never made it into our industry. But I will say this, Tracy, a lot of advisors say, "Well, I already get paid 1%, on my assets under management," right? So the thing that I teach, and here's the crux of it, is most advisors, by the way, I was always in a competitive situation. Always, always, always. When you're working at that high end, you're going to get, so I really always tried to just go last because I'd have 2 or 3 other advisors go, in front of me. And I knew exactly what they're going to pitch, exactly what they're going to say, because there's nothing new being trained in the industry. And so then they would come into me, and here's the deal. The difference is most advisors, they focus on the investment, the retirement planning side of the balance sheet. I focused on the risk side of the balance sheet. And when I say mean risk, I would tell them, I said, whether you're worth 10 million or 100 million or anywhere in between, if an event happened, and let me assure you, those events happen in a split second of time that would cause you to lose all your money. I don't really care how good your portfolio managers are. It's just that much more money for you to lose. So Tracy, I had, and I now teach 26 different areas for advisors to talk about on this risk side of the balance sheet. And it's things like you find out they have a lake house and there's a certain line of question. How is your lake house titled? Oh yeah, we own it free and clear. So let's assume that, I assume you have a boat. Yeah, we got a boat, a great notes and cigar boat, da, da, da. So let's pretend somebody gets hurt on your property. Do you realize that by having that lake house in your personal name, that what you've done is if somebody gets hurt on your boat and you're being sued, not only you're going to be sued for the value of your lake house, but now that can extend and you can be sued for every other asset that's in your personal name. Were you aware of that? And you're like, no, like, how come my attorney didn't? How come my CPA didn't tell me that? How come my real estate agent didn't tell me that? How come my current advisor didn't tell me that? Right. So that's just one. And we talk about, you find out that they have a teenager in college driving an automobile in their name. And you're like, oh yeah, we sent him away with a new Lexus or the used Lexus. And he's driving a car in your name and he's down at Texas A&M. So what happens if he has a couple cocktails one night and he hits a plastic surgeon and now you're being sued for $25 million? What is your plan around that? How do you protect this nest egg that you've been working for 40 years to create? Well, I don't know, and so, the thing about it is we call these things disturbing tracks. And I want to point out that these issues exist. These problems exist in the prospects' lives. Okay, we're not operating on a fear. I'm just identifying things that could potentially come along and cause catastrophic failure in their plan. So it's never a market loss. Market losses can be recovered from. I mean, that's whatever, but it's these unknowns. I think these things that are hidden under the rug, right? They have adult children. I'll give you one other example, and then you can ask me all the questions you want. The way I determined how important this was back in 1992. I had a couple that came in to see me, wanted financial planning. I was a stockbroker back then, and I thought I was doing financial planning. And he just retired from a big pharmaceutical company, and all they wanted to do was travel. So their plan was to travel from 55 to age 70 internationally, and then after 70, they were going to travel the United States. I thought, wow. I mean, they came in with an Excel spreadsheet. It was like amazing. I knew in the back of my head they had some kids, maybe. I thought they might have some grandkids, but we didn't go there. So came up with this plan. It was going to work out perfectly. They had plenty of money. About 6 weeks later, I get a phone call. Their oldest son, age 41, had died in the driveway washing his car, had a massive heart attack. He left 4 little kids, their grandchildren. He had a stay-at-home wife. He had a huge mortgage. He had just borrowed $800,000 to start a business, and he had no life insurance. Whose problem do you think that became? Of course, it became my client's problem. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, what could I have done? I couldn't have prevented the heart attack, right? But I could have asked, tell me about your oldest son. Where does he work? Does he have life insurance? They would have gladly paid for term life insurance on all 4 of their kids and their son and daughter-in-laws.
Right.
But instead, their lives were put on hold. They became the primary caregivers. Okay, the wife had to go back to work, and my clients were shuttling kids for 15 years to baseball practices, all for lack of a term life insurance policy. This was totally preventable. And so that was my Scarlett O'Hara moment. It's like, it's God is my witness. I don't want to be a part of that anymore. So my process has one conversation called the Visions and Values conversation. It's an interview. I'm going to ask you, Tracy, tell me all about you. Tell me your life story. Now I want to know about your mom and your dad, all of your brothers and sisters, all your nieces and nephews, and your children, your grandchildren. And then I'll go to your partner, your husband, your significant other. And I'm looking for potential train wrecks. What could come along and disrupt your plans, right? And so it's a very in-depth conversation, but we're not going to invest a penny of your money until I know that we've got some of these bases covered. And that's what I teach.
Erin, how can people learn more about your program and get in contact with you?
Sure. Thank you for that. Yeah, they can go to www.erinbotsford.com. And on that website, there's all kinds of testimonials. I encourage everybody, you can book a 30-minute strategy session with a member of my team and really figure out where are you in the business? Where do you want to be? Does working together make sense or does it not make sense? We've even, sent people to other programs that we think would make better sense for them.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Erin. It's been an absolute pleasure and quite a lot of value sitting here with you. I'm so grateful.
My pleasure. It was great.